Hello, everyone. My name is Janani, and as Colleen said, I'm a graduate student at Cornell University. Last semester, I was a teaching assistant for a public health microbiology classroom, and last semester, as we all know, was this frantic shift to the hybrid and online-only models of learning for many of us. And so this study was motivated by a desire to understand how student experiences vary between these two classroom modalities, online versus in person, and specifically, for the online only group, how usage or non-usage of video cameras impacts their experience and engagement with their peers. And so up top, you can see the two questions that I just sort of elaborated on. How does being in a hybrid classroom affect student experience? Are you experiencing the course content and the classroom differently if you're a student attending in person versus online? And if you are attending via Zoom, what is the role of camera usage in online learning, right? And so the course name was BioMe 2500, Public Health Microbiology, and our assessment was done using an end of semester survey, and I've put in two references down here. The Castelli and Chevari paper in particular was really important in terms of laying the foundation for us in thinking about camera usage and the different factors that could be affecting camera usage in students. And then the second paper, it's more of a conference presentation, but I happen to know the authors because they're also from Cornell. And we got some ideas about thinking about group work and how to structure group activities and measure those dynamics from that work. And so the little icons here kind of show you the 5 areas, the assessment areas that the survey focused on. The first was learning preferences, and this is us trying to understand how students' learning preferences. Are they social learners? Do they prefer to work independently? How does that affect their participation in the classroom? Then we talked about group behavior self-assessment, which is when we ask students to rate their own contributions to groups. And you'll see when I describe the class structure, that the class was structured as a flipped classroom model with a lot of active learning assignments. So the first 10 to 15 minutes of the class would be spent on lectures and recapping the readings and the content that students were asked to prepare before class. And then the bulk of the class was really spent in these little home groups of about 4 to 5 students working on assignments and solving problems together. So we asked students to tell us how much they thought they were contributing to these group discussions, about the same as their peers, less than their peers, or more than their peers. We also factored pandemic concerns into our survey, understanding that the last year has just been a very difficult and stressful one, and that has affected the learning experience for both students and instructors. For the online only group, we had questions about camera use patterns. How frequently did they use their camera? What were the reasons why they didn't use their camera, and so on. And finally, we had some open-ended questions where students could tell us about the benefits and the challenges of their chosen modality. And here are the results. In the interest of time, I'm only presenting 3 broad results, but I'm happy to expand on any of the other categories if people have questions. So the first result, which was kind of heartening to know, was that class modality did not have an effect on student exam performance. As far as grades go, we didn't see a difference between students who took the class in person or students who attended online, which I'm hoping will be a sigh of relief for those of us who were forced to change our instructional modalities sort of overnight. We also found that that perception of self-contribution to group discussions that I mentioned was actually associated with a higher mean grade, especially for online groups. And it's interesting because I interpret that in 2 different ways. Maybe students who were more prepared and did the class readings were able to contribute more to the group discussions, and they ended up doing better on the exams. Or maybe speaking up in discussions and helping their classmates learn actually boosted students' sense of their own competence and helped them perform better in exams. I don't know yet. That's something I would tease out in a future study, I think. And finally, as far as the camera usage question goes, overwhelmingly, we found that camera use was peer-driven. So 94% of students reported having their cameras off because nobody else in the breakout room had their camera on, which is really interesting because when you look at the second statistic there, it says that 50% of students reported higher engagement with classmates that they could see. And the thing that came up in our pandemic concerns assessment was this group at least did not have any concerns in terms of access to technology, concerns about privacy or living situation, etc. So Moving on to some reflections and potential recommendations for hybrid course design. We would encourage camera use, but in this course, we didn't make it mandatory, just keeping in mind all of these concerns that I just mentioned: access to technology, access to internet, differences in living situations, and privacy concerns. Breakout rooms can spark metacognition, and I haven't shown this data, but this came from our qualitative analysis of the open-ended responses. But students mentioned retaining ideas better, learning concepts better, and clarifying confusing concepts better in these breakout room interactions, even on Zoom. So breakout rooms, we saw, can spark metacognition, but they do need to be tailored to the online environment. And so one example of the way we did this in this course was to increase familiarity in the breakout room groups by having the same home groups. So students were placed into different home groups, and those home groups stayed consistent throughout the course. And so this helped them get over that initial barrier of Zoom awkwardness and introducing themselves to new people again and again. And they were able to speak up more, turn on their cameras more, and just participate a little bit more when they knew the people that they were in breakout room groups with. And with that, I want to thank Susan Merkel, who was a co-instructor for this class, but who also worked with me on the survey, as well as the Center for Teaching Innovation at Cornell, and especially Dr. Amy Curtis, who was instrumental in helping us get IRB approval and pointing us to the right resources to design this survey. I will stop. Feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or via email if you have questions.